It's really interesting to be here, great pleasure. I used to do 100 engagements a year on stages around the world. And when COVID came, that went down to the computer, looking at the green light. 3 weeks ago, I went to Moscow, and this is my second actual engagement with real people. I assume that you're real, with real people here. So great to have you. Thanks very much for having me. Greetings to everybody, the officials and the organizers, and of course the millions of people out there streaming. So I'm going to speak to you about the future, which is actually a pretty hard job nowadays, because in many ways you could say the future is no longer like science fiction. The future is here. It's funny, 20 years ago we talked about if we can do this, and today we're saying, well, yeah, okay, we can have an artificially intelligent machine, a self-driving car, music in the cloud, free phone calls, long list. Right? The future is no longer about tomorrow, it's a mindset. And that's why I would propose right from the beginning, when we talk about skills, that we enlarge the definition of skill. Skills are, it's interesting, when you look back at the definition of skills in training and vocational, there is something that goes beyond or on top of the skills, and that is really the sort of future readiness, the mindset, right? The character. And there's a word called character skills, right? For example, being open, resilient, agile. Would you call it a skill to be agile? Would you call it a skill to be optimistic? Well, yeah, some of that is a skill, of course, right? But it's a mindset. And I lived in America for 20 years, and now I live in Zurich in Switzerland. And I can tell you, of course, the mindset of Americans is always going forward, always looking for something else. Then I went to Moscow 3 weeks ago. I've gone to Russia quite a bit. The mindset there is hungry, right? We want to go forward. Eastern Europe in general, of course, hungry to go forward. Switzerland, keep it the way it is, just make it better. Right? Of course, that's not true for all of Switzerland, but Switzerland has lots of entrepreneurship. So I want to expand this also a little bit in the context of saying what is going on in the world today is we're going from the industrial economy, extraction, fossil fuels, oil and gas, the information economy, right? Basically production, optimization, efficiency, digitization. Now we're going to the creative economy, the experience economy, the economy of ideas. Winston Churchill said in 1947, the future, what did he say? The future mindset is about the mindset of ideas. Right? And so we have to think about skills and ideas and character. Think of that a little bit further than we have in the past. Let me just make sure my clicker is actually working. I want to start with this. In the COVID crisis, we have all worked from home, and this was the result, right? We used to work a little bit more diversified, getting lunch, sitting in traffic, and now it's all working, right? It's kind of a joke in a way, but a lot of research showing that we actually work a lot more because we work at home. Remember 20 years ago, people used to say, technology will help us to work less. Not true, right? Because of this, we work more. Technology in the future will help us to work less in a dramatic way because machines are no longer stupid. In fact, machines have very good skills. But they're only at the beginning. Now think about what machines will be doing in the future. Any job that is routine, any job, whether you're a scientist or drive a tractor, if it's a routine, a machine can do at least a good chunk of this job. If you work in banking, today you go out and you verify information, you work on loan agreements or so. That is called robotic process automation, right? Where a machine goes out and does that for you, and then you can say, well, I believe it or I don't, but we have powerful tools. In 10 years, these tools will get really, really, really good, kind of like the CD compared to Spotify. Right? I mean, who in their right mind buys a CD today, right? Well, some people still do. I was in the music business for a long time, but today, if you buy a CD or a DVD and give it to your kids, if you have kids for Christmas, they'll call a therapist, right? They think you're something wrong with you. And this is how the whole economy of ideas is changing us and going into a different future. We're going warp drive, right? Star Trek, Remember Star Trek, right? You're in the pilot seat, you hit the button, boom, off you go. And that is because of COVID acceleration. As much pain as COVID has given, many of us, my company's revenues, we do future workshops, were down 90% in 2020. I think many of you, especially production team, can probably sympathize with all of that stuff that has happened. But basically, in this kind of warp drive scenario, look at all the stuff that we've done in the internet time now. It's basically vast acceleration. Telemedicine, 10x up. Remote working, of course. Remote learning, online entertainment, explosive. My neighbor, 75 years old in Zurich, had a smartphone before COVID. Now, in the COVID days, he was looking at the smartphone and was thinking, like, everybody's talking about buying food online now. So he actually used it to get Uber Eats and bring food. And now that we can go out again, he is continuing to use it. And this is only the beginning. We're going to see virtual reality holograms becoming as normal as WhatsApp. And that opens up a bunch of other problems, of course, because it's potentially quite lonely there, Did you know that the #1 cause of death of the power users of social media is loneliness? In other words, the people who use social media the most, to the excessive, they're the most prone to suicide by over-networking in a virtual environment. So there's many challenges about how this works and why it works, but one thing is for sure, as you may have seen the movie Blade Runner years ago, 1982, of course the latest one, which is not so good. Really the bottom line is the next 10 years will bring more change than the previous 100 years. I know it sounds crazy, right? When you think about 100 years ago, World War I and II, the internet, atomic bomb, right? But the next 10 years, computers will have quantum computing, which means unlimited computing power. They will have battery life for weeks. You will have an electric car. Within 10 years, it will probably go 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 kilometers on one topping. I mean, think about the exponential change we're looking at. And basically, it's safe to say science fiction is becoming science fact. Now, think about that when you think about vocational training. Many things that I learned in school, I went to school first for philosophy and theology in Bonn when I was I don't know, 500 years ago. And then I went to school for music. I became a musician and producer. A very skills-based thing. But I realized early on that no matter what my skill was on performing jazz standards, I didn't have the other thing. I couldn't really make a difference with that work. I had the skill, but I didn't have the rest of it, right? And now we're going towards a world where we're going to have to reinvent what work is. It may very well be in 20 years, probably before that we're only working 2 or 3 hours a day because the computers do the rest. Of course, computers can't do everything, right? Obviously, a computer can't come and fix your toilet. It's very hard for a robot to fix your toilet. But a computer can look at your financial portfolio. So we see all the growth in sort of non-routine work, right? So non-routine manual work, crafts, and skills like that, and of course non-routine cognitive work, which I'll talk about. But in this future, we're seeing already the kind of stuff that we saw in Blade Runner emerge in a fast pace. This is the Facebook virtual reality room that Mark Zuckerberg and his wisdom just presented. And it's actually a place where you see each other, you turn around, it's like a real room with an avatar. Right? Suffice to say, I would never trust Facebook with anything, so I wouldn't use it. But yeah, it seems technically quite interesting. And of course, we have dancing robots now. I mean, science fiction, science fact, a robot, 600-pound robot, couldn't even open a door 10 years ago without breaking it. And now, dancing, right? Boston Dynamics, you can watch it on YouTube. Right? I can't play the music because I would get kicked off YouTube if I do. But we have this absolute...
I've never seen nothing like this before in my life. Do you see this?
Now, talk about skills, right? This is Robodog, used by a New York City Police Department. And everybody got really excited about Robodog, being able to go into a building and take care of difficult situations. But turns out, This machine didn't have a lot of skills. It could do certain things, but it didn't work with people at all. In fact, people were either scared or they were trying to kick it over, or, so they took it off again. Suffice to say, technology isn't always the answer. It's when we look at skills, that's obviously a very, very big challenge. But clearly, we are now at this point where we can safely say we're entering the exponential age. And it's funny, I live in Switzerland, Austria, Germany, a little bit similar thinking on this. We believe in evidence, right? Beweis, logic, engineering. Of course, the exponential age is kind of catapulted by Silicon Valley. We're thinking of the future as something that is leaping. Right? Moore's law, Metcalfe's law. Our future will not come gradually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as we like to believe in countries where we like engineering and logic. Our future is leaping. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. We are at 4. Our next destination is 8. Right? And that is 12 to 18 months away. So think about 10 years when, let's say, some of your kids that are now in school are graduating. We are 256 up the scale. 30 steps across the room, I get to the other door there. 30 steps exponential, I get 26 times around the world. Think about that for a second. That is where we are going. We're going clearly to a world where we're going to invent our own work. I invented my own work by accident. I didn't know what a futurist was or is. You probably don't still know them. But I was like, oh, sounds interesting, we'll give it a try. Right? 10 years ago, there were very few people working in social media. Guess how many people work in social media today? 21 million. Where did they all come from? And they're working in the cloud, right? They're working in Kuala Lumpur, working on the cloud remotely and training each other what they have to know, whatever CSS, JavaScript, whatever they're doing, right? That shows us what the future is. Make your own job, get your own skills, learn on demand, keep learning, keep changing, find a new job, move on. Also very Darwinistic, of course, by European standard. Where's the job security in this? So now that we're sort of in a corona rebound, I'm being optimistic here, or maybe sarcastic, I don't know. But I think at the end of this period of corona, we have learned really important things. First, the value of being human. We actually like each other. We don't always want to be in there and just look at the green light. We like people. The value of collaboration. The value of breaking rules. I mean, how many rules have we broken in the corona crisis? We're giving the Italians 260 billion euros, even though everybody says it's not going to come back. Right? Fine. Right? We're offering vaccination for free outside of the rules of Big Pharma. Fine. Right? Changing all the rules just because it's existential. So in this crisis, there's 3 big points for skills and training. 3 big fields, right? Big tech, big science. We heard it before. Exploding. All of the success in the stock market is here. So we're going from this idea of basically the industrial society, the information society. Now it's going to be, of course, the society of science and bioengineering and so on. But even bigger is big green. It's been said many times already, and how come we didn't talk about that 5 years ago? It wasn't obvious, right? But now it's like really obvious. This is the biggest re-engineering of our global society that is coming. And in fact, because of big tech, we can do big green. But there's one big problem, of course, if we do big green without big state. Let's call it big policy, okay? Not big state sounds really bad. It will never happen. That's the role of the government, of the people also, to make that happen. And the jobs in this region, millions. The World Economic Forum says hundreds of millions of new jobs, as this is shifting the money. We spend $5.6 trillion a year on fossil fuel subsidy, helping the oil companies pollute, rewarding people for driving cheaper. I'm all for rewarding poor people. That's a whole different story, right? But if we took that money and we got a bunch of carbon taxes from our own flying, we would have 50 trillion euros to spend. Now, that's kind of what the Green Deal is all about, shifting the money. And then we can educate people for creating their own job, having expertise in these fields. And when I talk about expertise, I think it's most important also to realize that humans don't do anything unless it's for a reason. And there are two reasons. You probably know for yourself. Right? Pain and love. That's how we change. How do you change your job? You have pain with the current job. You fall in love with a new job. How do you acquire a skill? You say, oh God, if I only had that skill, I could do X, Y, Z. That's the motivation. If everything is fine, do we add skills? Not really. We didn't do anything about the whole pandemic situation until we had one. We didn't do anything about nuclear scenarios, nuclear warfare, until we had 2 bombs. And now that we've done COVID, we say, okay, you know what? Maybe we should prepare for climate change, policy change. So I would say big education, big training goes right on top of all 3 of those. And you're going to see, as I said earlier, trillions of euros shifting in the direction of making that work, both in academics as well as regular education, ongoing education, adult education, of course, vocational training. Consider yourself lucky, that is an obvious solution. So we're going into this world that includes what I call the mega shifts, and you'll get my book later if you want, pick one up. Chapter 3 of the book is about the mega shifts, and you can download it for free in 12 languages at megashifts.digital, and it's basically the result of technology. So if you're looking at this, it kind of give you a headache of all the things that are moving at the same time. That is what we're currently going through. The next 10 years will be utterly complicated, chaotic, and a great opportunity. In fact, I would say that the next 10 years could bring in a sort of strange golden era, like after World War II. Yeah? Like a total reset and redefinition. All these things are happening at the same time. Cognitive systems, virtual systems, disintermediation of colleges and universities. So a couple of key points here. I'll give a couple of bullet points so you can, we're going to share the slide later, you can see it. So 80 to 90% of the world will be connected at high-speed internet in 2030. We're talking about 8 billion people here. Where are they going to study? Well, they're going to study in every possible way they can. Today it's only 4.2 billion. Think about the change of that. Mobile devices. Will no longer need the nanotechnology, the rare earth minerals, and new kinds of batteries will last for weeks, and they can be 3D printed, very cheap. Virtuality, the key word today, of course, is the metaverse. Again, Zuckerberg's hype, and Elon Musk, of course. It's going to be as normal as WhatsApp. 70% of all new jobs in 2030 haven't even been invented yet, says the World Economic Forum. Well, they say many things, so we don't have to talk about that later. But basically, that is true. I used to be in the music business, and most people were in record labels or the record store. You know the most popular job now in the music business? Data mining on Spotify. Figuring out where the band should go next. Hundreds of millions, thousands of new jobs in the music industry, nothing to do with actual music, just with the data behind it. Right? 50% of new jobs are likely to be remote or in the cloud. Of course, you can't be remote to fix a toilet again or to set up a house or, obviously not. So those jobs are kind of outside of this. Education and training will be blended in all different ways, hybrid, on demand, lifelong, and available everywhere. That's going to change the game for everything. So my view clearly, if we go down the bullets, that we're going to see academic education and vocational converging. Both have their benefits and their drawbacks, but the digital economy is forcing us to do this. Hiring will be increasingly based on skills and character. Right? Yeah, I think we'll still have degrees on top of all of that, but people are going to say, you know what, I want a guy who's emotionally intelligent, right? That's a rare occasion, but it does happen. Allegedly, women have a lot of EQ already, so women are the future, of course, you know that, there's many women here. Right? If you're looking at government around the world, who are the leaders, the best leaders around the world? Women and young people. So God knows where Germany is going to go with this. Different story. But anyway, so some of you may say, well, the future sounds very scary. Well, it sounds really exciting. And to that I would say, an old saying from Barbara Hubbard, who was a futurist, also working with Buckminster Fuller, as you see the future, so you act. As you act, so you become. In other words, when you look at the future as being lousy and it's going to really be bad because of, America and China and automation and the story, and of course Netflix and Black Mirror, right? Then the future is going to be like this for you because you have decided that it most likely won't work. It's an assumption. Can we assume that the future is exciting? I think the future is much better than we think. In fact, I think because of this, business as usual is dead. That's exciting to me. Dead or dying. I was at the International Mobility thing, the conference in Munich, the IAA, formerly IAA, 3 weeks ago, and it's clear the car industry as we know it is dead or dying. Right? Is that bad? No, because now they are the mobility industry. Right? The music industry died, have you noticed? Right? Went down from 50 billion in selling records, shrunk to 15 billion globally, and boom, Apple, Spotify, now they're selling 2 billion a month in streaming. Set to go, basically twice the value. So basically what's happening here is it's opening up lots of opportunities in this sort of global reset scenario that we're seeing. Now, it's basically like shaking up the globe into a new logic. And that new logic includes a different way of looking at capitalism. And that has great ramifications for skills and jobs. To understand where that's going and what all the details are, great quote here from Alvin Toffler, right? The illiterate of the 21st century are not those that can't read or write, it is those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. Okay? I emphasize relearn. As a futurist, I have to relearn every day. I have to question my assumptions. And this is really where skills come in. You question your assumption that this is still correct. And we all have to do that every single day. And then all of a sudden, it's like you go to therapy with your husband or your wife, and you have assumptions about the relationships because you've been married for 30 years, It turns out, therapist shows you, hopefully, it's not true. Turns out, actually, that was just your assumption. There is something else beyond the assumption. And when you think about skills, this is a skill we need to go into the future. Because Alvin Toffler also said it's the framework of society that's changing with technology, right? Not the picture. When we talk about education, for example, it's not about taking a class on Coursera or watching YouTube, right? That's the picture. But the framework of vocational training is really this, right? It's all of these game changes. I won't go through all of them because we'll be here tonight for drinks, heavy drinks. If we go through all of that stuff. Right? But basically, it's big data, cloud computing, quantum computing, the blockchain. You can find out more by just looking for game changers in my name. But for example, just this one thing, right? Natural language processing, NLP. Computers can talk to us, we can talk to computers. That's kind of working today. Not really well enough yet, but very soon it will. You can speak to the computer and ask a question and get a coherent answer. Is it human? No. Is it intelligent? Not really, but very useful. Like Google Maps. Right? Do you trust Google Maps? Well, if you're from Graz and you're driving around in Google Maps, using Google Maps, you kind of look somewhere else also, right? You're saying, no, that can't be true. So there is an intelligence in the system that goes beyond what we have. And of course, the companies who are winning around the world, as I said earlier, they're in the creation economy. They create marketplaces. Amazon is a master of automator. They automate everything. Last year, they hired 260,000 people. Just now, they announced they're going to hire 150,000 people. And guess where they are? They're not in Seattle, they're in the cloud. And think about those opportunities for small countries or regions, what that means, what we can do in the cloud, what we can do there. I mean, clearly here, again, another really great quote, Buckminster Fuller, he says, education is going to be a #1 industry. The next Google is going to be in education and training and learning. just wait for that moment to happen. It's not far away, because that is urgent for us. As was said earlier, we need people with better skills, better understanding, better mindset. So that is definitely coming. Some of the old stuff that we used to do, like regular television, is going away. And that will be quite hard for a lot of universities and academic institutions when they're thinking about their advantages changing and their whole food chain changing into this, right? It's basically, if you want to learn stuff, the world is your oyster. Right? It's everywhere. But let's not forget that real learning involves the body. As many psychologists say, we learn not with the brain, but with the body. It's all one thing for us, really. So there is, of course, the power of vocational training comes back there in full measures. So let's talk about this in a context. I made a film. I make one film a year, and for this one I went to Lanzarote to make this film. It's called The Good Future. And the film outlines basically what we have to do to have a good future, not a lousy future. Because right now it's a very good time to talk about the lousy future. But this film is going to be really important, as I said earlier, because of this idea of saying we have to think about the future as an opportunity. You do a lot of research on this, and it turns out, Ipsos, for example, found that people in Brazil, India, Argentina, and other places are 50 to 60% positive about the future. They think the future will be better than today. And what is the country that is the least positive about the future? Thankfully not Austria, but not far away, France, right? 8%. And what does it tell you about, with the kind of planning for education? Well, if you don't think the future will be good, what else is there to do, than to move to New Zealand or to Lanzarote, for that matter? We have to take a wider view. So vocational training, education, learning has to take a wider view away from the focused view on one thing, like the music business, selling records. No, we sell the cloud. Right? And cars are no longer cars, they're a service, a platform. So I would encourage you to think about you or what you do in vocational training and in learning in general, to take a wider view. That's the ticket, right? To think about where that could be going, because again, I think the most powerful view on this, going back to Isaac Asimov, one of my favorite science fiction writers, that's the trouble with education as we know it. It's for the young. And people think of education as something they can finish. Right? The most ridiculous thought, really. Right? I mean, I'm 60 years old. I look forward to getting more education. And that is sort of the nature of my work. Right? And older people are going on, not to say older, but people who are not youngsters, right, are going to stay and help us figure this out. And there's very useful things for them to get new skills and participate. That is definitely happening. 70 is the new 50, you heard that before, right? The silver surface, all that stuff is happening. So for us here in Europe, right, 3 waves that we're going to look at that represent huge opportunities and gigantic challenges at the same time. That's always really the same, right? First wave is COVID. Second wave is climate change. COVID-19 is essentially a test run for climate change. Right? All the stuff we have to go through with COVID, just wait until we have to do that for climate change. And this generates a huge opportunity, probably the biggest business opportunity ever in the last 50 years, is to get away from oil and gas and coal. The money is there. We printed 34 trillion euros worldwide to deal with COVID. Do you see a recession and an inflation? Loss of confidence? Not really, in some countries, but generally not. Because it's existential. Where's the well-spent money? Right? Same thing is going to happen here, and of course, ultimately, with the rethinking of economic logic. So basically, we're going to a future here where we have to give up on this kind of idea like we don't know what the future is. We do. There is no black swan. They're all gray swans. We've seen them all. Right? We're now at a junction, a fork in the road. Right? Green is the new digital. Right? It's said before as well. That is a huge amount of momentum. We can see the numbers here from on the dark side here from what is happening if we don't do anything. Right? I mean, detrimental numbers. to the positive numbers as to what's happening here in terms of innovation. I mean, just look at this hype curve, so-called hype curve, right? The next 2 years, we have already accomplished many of the things that are coming. In the next 2 years, think about all the new jobs and skills for that. The next 2 to 5 years, the yellow line, right? That's also immediate future. How do we motivate people to be a part of this? This is going to be crucial, I think. I'll publish this later as a PDF, so I know it's a lot of information. And the World Economic Forum in their utter optimism. No other comment on this, but look at the numbers, right? 390 million new jobs in the green economy. That may be a little bit optimistic, but yeah, it's a good number to talk about, and we can discuss it later. So I'm running a little bit out of time, so I'm just going to give you a snapshot. Otherwise, again, we will be here tonight. But the most important part of when we think about our future as humans, this is not new. Machines can do all that stuff now. And people think about machines being able to do a lot of stuff. Like here, the Greek people, for example, think it's very probable that machines can take care of human work. So this is an ongoing discussion. I believe what's really happening, and I think this is quite obvious, it's the end of routine. Not every routine. Right? Like for a human, driving a car is a routine. Very hard to do for a machine. Have you seen a lot of self-driving cars here in Graz or in Vienna? But there's a reason, right? In theory, it should work. Reality is different. But we do a lot of routine. I don't know about your job, but when I look at my job, I say there's at least 40–50% routine. I'm going to get rid of it. Scheduling, I got rid of that. Use an app for that. Right? And on the story goes, and this is where the jobs are going away. Basically, if you work like a robot will take your job. Right? And that's something we have to live with. I mean, it's basically what's happening here. Like, this is an app, for example, where you type or you speak, and it makes a spreadsheet. You don't have to learn Excel. It's called GPT-3. It's an app from OpenAI, and you just type, right? And it basically generates a spreadsheet as you're typing or speaking. Right? It makes all the, that's not going to take anybody's job, I don't think, except for maybe an MBA who's trying to do that. Right? I'll skip this one because we don't have enough time. But we have a similar story in the New York Times just weeks ago where GPT-3 was introduced. And this is an app it's called Learn from Anyone. And you can go there and ask anybody a question that's a public figure. Elon Musk, Peter Drucker, Gandhi, dead people, live people, doesn't matter. And the AI goes out and gets all the information and makes an answer for you. But think about this for a second. You know what machines are doing? They're going out to a huge library. Think of it like a giant armoire with 1,500,000 different drawers, right? And they're pulling out all the examples and dishing up the answer. They have no idea what they're talking about. It just sounds good. But it's still very powerful, right? So very, very interesting story here. We should not confuse a clear view with a short distance when it's about machines being like humans. Intelligent. That's why I think we're going to need skills that can keep up with this. Ultimately, really what these machines are is intelligent assistants, IA, not AI. Right? They're basically fancy software. Look at all the jobs that are going to increase because of AI. They're all in the creative sector and the human sector. Yeah. So again, when I talk about skills, very important to realize this. When I wrote the book, that was 5 years ago, but it's still running strong, technology versus humanity. Well, there are a lot of skills in technology, but there are also skills in humanity. Right? And which ones are the ticket? Clearly, if you have basic tech skills like programming, as I've just shown you, no longer required in the future. Good skills in technology, absolutely. So there's a lot of growth in this direction in different ways that's going to happen, and basically leading us to this, the new pyramid of work and skills and training. And we have the fortune or misfortune, you could say, to be stuck at the bottom of this kind of Maslow pyramid. Logic, information, right? Basically, when you went to school and when I went to school, we downloaded information. I learned Greek and Hebrew and Latin, what have you. Right? It was an interesting exercise, but yeah, it's here, right? That's called machine knowledge, basically. Human knowledge is completely different. When I see you out there later for the book signing, I can know in 0.3 seconds if you're interesting or a threat, or I just know, right? Like you would know when you meet me. That's what humans do. That's called this, right? Tacit knowledge, deeper knowledge, wisdom, understanding. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about understanding, right? It has nothing to do with knowledge, like all this stuff down here that you read in books. No. Different story. Right? So we're moving up in the world to here. And these are going to be all the new jobs, all the new training, combined, of course, with the handicraft and the skills of doing actual things. Okay? So a carpenter that's also a good human, like we saw the example earlier, you mentioned, I think, the builder that came to your house, obviously reading between the lines, right? That is the ideal combination of where we're going to go into this future. That is the combination where we're going to, in this digital tunnel, we're going to have two perspectives. This is where we're going, whether you want to or not, we're not going back. Right? There's no such thing as staying off the tunnel. Yeah? It's basically, yeah, you can try, but so on the one hand, we have science, technology, and so on dominating. On the other hand, we have something that only we can do. Right? In my book, I call this STEM and HECI, humanity, ethics, creativity, imagination. And that's part of the skill landscape today. And that is a mindset. You know, the future mindset allows you to do what human-only skills are really our future. And you'd be surprised how many skills machines will pick up in the near future. They can fly an airplane today. We don't want them to because it worries us. They can drive a car, and you can only do it in Palo Alto because, you know, a 5-year-old could drive in Palo Alto using Waymo. But in Rome, good luck with a self-driving car. Right? So we have all of these things already around us, and the bottom line really is this, that we have to face when we look at skills. Right? Again, if you work like a robot will take your job. If you learn like a robot, you'll never have a job. And we were actually foolish enough when I went to school, you know, to university, to believe that if we would be a good robot, we could actually have a safe job, right? No. That's finished. Right? And that's something we have to learn where we're going. I'm going to summarize now, otherwise I'll be kicked off the stage here, okay? Just give me a second here to do my fancy shortcutting, because obviously I was vastly optimistic here on my speaking speed, but I try my best. You know. It's my German perfection breaking through. So anyway, I want to wrap up and say, what do we do now? Right? First, we have to realize this is a ticket to the future. Right? Awesome humans on top of amazing technology. That's a great American word, right? It's basically humans that are different, extraordinary. They have mysteries, humanity, emotions, intelligence, real intelligence. And that's the future of skills, right? It's always going to be a mix. You can't say it's going to be just this or just that, unless, of course, you're clearly a super, you know, powerful scientist. Of course, you may have to skip some of the human things because you don't have time. Like Einstein, you know, who said, basically, imagination is more important than knowledge. Well, only a person that's a genius can clearly, easily say that like this, right? Because we also need a combination of those two things, you know, at all times, depending on who you are. This is what will really matter. And we're going to need what I call digital ethics here, to decide what is right or wrong. Clearly, we have many things that are totally wrong that make a boatload of money. Facebook is the best example. The most corrosive force of democracy and in our lives is a social media company that makes $120 million profit every single day, mining our data, right? That handshake has collapsed. So we have to think about, when we think about the future of work, the more we connect, the more we have to protect what makes us human. Think of basically technology being hugely powerful and growing exponentially, and we're like children compared to that. We're still the same. And what do we do with children? We protect them. And for good reason. We don't want them to be disconnected from reality, right? But we don't let a 10-year-old buy a bottle of vodka. Right? We protect them. So our governments are going to do the same thing. This is also going to be very important for jobs, to protect jobs in the sense of not keeping the old jobs, but moving them on to up the pyramid. and to help people make that leap. Why can't a taxi driver become a guy who runs a remote transportation portal? Well, some of them may not have any skills of technology or internet, right? But most of it is a mindset. Saying, no, 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 I can't do it. That's what we have to start working on. Another important thing is that, especially in Europe, let's stop looking at the rear mirror of education. Right? We look backwards by saying, okay, the future is going to be totally different, but we'll just make the same thing just a little bit better. Right? That's not going to work. We have to build a future mindset because the future is no longer about tomorrow. The future is a mindset. The future is here, if you haven't noticed. Right? I mean, there are people talking about uploading our brain to the internet. Elon Musk wants to start space colonization. Right? And the lab in Bern is looking at nuclear fusion power. It's like, it's not that far. It's not 50 years. Right? So build the future mindset. Two things about the mindset, and then I'm really going to be off. Right? This is the world we're living in, confusing, paradoxical, ubiquitous, chaotic. Right? You need this, right? To pay attention. I guarantee you that if somebody's looking 18 years old right now, looking at his future and saying, I want to decide what I want to be, when they develop the ability to observe, it comes to them. Right? It's a future mindset that's going to be important, and to take, of course, a holistic view of the world, not a myopic view. And we're really good at that in Europe. You know, we have this myopic view of what is possible. And Americans are the opposite. They have this super large view of what is possible, which is also very confusing. Right? So the two coming together, this is where we have advantage. Right? Europe will be the leader in the sustainable age and in the age of education. That's our window for this to come. So to wrap up, most importantly, the future is better than we think. Our skills can be developed better than we think. We have better possibilities than we think. We have to make up our mind as to what we want and how to get it in place. But we have all the cards. Thanks very much for listening.